Hey there! Let's play a little game of what's in the box. If you're guessing it's a Victorinox Swiss Army knife, well, of course you're right. And based on the title I'll probably give this video, if you're guessing it's a rare vintage Victorinox Swiss Army knife, well, you're only half right. Because there's actually two very rare vintage, antique Victorinox Swiss Army knives in that box, both of them being well over 100 years old. Both of these knives you're about to see come from Dave Arnold's exceptional collection and will be featured in his upcoming book on vintage Wenger Swiss Army knives. Dave has, tongue firmly in cheek, included these knives in a section entitled Other Swiss Knife Makers. For those Swiss Army knife fans out there that have quit watching my channel because they thought I would never do another video on Swiss Army knives, all I can say is, well, if you only knew, you'd be sorry. And for all of the rest of you, thanks for joining me. Sit back and relax, because it's time for the show to begin. All right, so I think that's an adequate build-up worthy of these knives. So without further ado, you're looking at the earliest version of a Victorinox standard officer's knife, the knife that would go on to become known as the Spartan, with 4 pins, which most likely dates it before 1909, with aluminum handles. Do you remember a little over a year ago when I did a video on one of Dave Arnold's early Wengers in aluminum handles? And as amazing as we found that knife at the time, we had no idea that Victorinox also made knives with aluminum handles over 100 years ago. And I can now reveal that that Wenger knife was repaired and refurbished by none other than Victorinox. And Victorinox's cutlers that worked on that knife had never seen one that old of either a Wenger or their own. You know, I think we're all familiar with Victorinox's later model aluminum knives. They first came out with the Pioneer in 1957, which had ALOX scales, and that went on to become the basis for the 1961 model soldier knives. And to this day they use ALOX and similar construction on their newer knives. Most recently, I guess, their Hunter Pro ALOX and also their Farmer X. But few of us knew that Victorinox was putting aluminum handles on their knives over 100 years ago. You know, aluminum was developed in the 1800s, but it really didn't see widespread use, industrial use, until after World War II in the 1950s. But at the turn of the century, the 20th century, the early 1900s, aluminum was reserved and used for small luxury items. It was treated much like a precious metal. And so here we find it on a very special knife. Let's just go through this knife, talk about its construction and its age. First of all, the aluminum handles. You see them here. They serve as both the covers and the liners. There are no separate liners because the aluminum handles are the structural element. This knife does have an aluminum spacer in the middle. But again, you see the 4 pins. Now Victorinox has had 4 visible pins up until 1909. Here's an example of an early officer's knife in the more common, if you can call this common, red fiber scales. And here you can see the 4 pins. Of course, the bales on these knives obscure this end pin, but it's of course here. So up until 1909 we had 4 pins. After 1909 there were just 3 visible pins, as you can see here in this other early fiber model. We can date this knife, I think, somewhere between 1903 because it does have the optional bail. That's when Victorinox started offering the bail and the shield as an option. And most likely 1909 because of these 4 pins that you can see. Now there is one feature on this knife that may make this knife a little younger than that, might date it a little later than 1909, and I'll talk about that when I get there. One way to tell a really old Victorinox officer's knife is if you have one with a solid screwdriver. Because back when this knife was designed and made, crown cork seals on bottles weren't a thing. All the tools on this knife are carbon steel. Victorinox didn't start using stainless until 1923. Here you can see the old style can opener. A lot of people don't realize this, but this was originally designed to be plunged into the side of the can near the top. When this knife was made, cans were designed in a way where you actually open them around the outside near the top. They actually had some actually had paper labels with a dotted line at the top to show you where to open the can. Many of these tools still have good snap. Again, this is just a 2-layer 6 implement officer's knife. Here's the small pen blade. It's a clip point blade. This one is a little short. I'm going to do a slideshow at the end, some kind of a before and after slideshow to show you some of the things I did to clean up this knife. I want to show you what I was able to achieve with this blade. And then the main blade. Main blade's in good shape. This one's not short. It's just lost a little bit of its edge from sharpening. Again, carbon. Here's the tang stamp. Army Swiss with the Swiss cross to the left. This is one of Victorinox's first tang stamp. They used a couple. They used this from 1891 to 1935. And then the back tools. Here is the rounded awl. Here you can see the aluminum spacer in this knife. And then finally the corkscrew. Now this is a little curious to me because on the very earliest Swiss officer's knives, the corkscrew is usually solid. Here is this early fiber 4-pin again, and let me get this out, we can see it a little better. We can see that it does not have the decorative groove. You know, later vintage Swiss Army knives had a decorative groove, and then they did away with it in the 1990s. But if you go all the way back, the earliest, very first ones had a solid corkscrew. So I don't know what that means. Perhaps this corkscrew has been replaced. It's very easy to break a corkscrew. It is carbon, so it's got to be before 1923, this tool, and I don't see any evidence of it being replaced. Probably the stronger possibility is this was just kind of a transitional knife where Victorinox maybe put their latest tool version on a knife with 4 pins. Maybe sometime just after 1909. Anyway, if you think this knife is just a one-off or a custom knife, wait till you see the next one. Now you might want to pause the video and go get some duct tape if you have some and wrap your head with it just in case it wants to explode. You're looking at another very early 4-pin Victorinox officer's knife. This being a very rare model with a horse hoof pick. So this is a very early equestrian or horseman's model with an optional hoof pick. This is a very rare model. We only know of one other. It's with a collector in Switzerland. It has the red fiber scales, and he's never seen an aluminum one. So I guess we're going to say this knife is unique until we're able to find another one. Now it's just like the one we looked at. 4 pins, pre-1909, with a bail, so somewhere between 1903 and 1909. It's basically a 2-layer, 6-tool standard officer's knife with the addition of an extra 7th tool, the hoof pick. And it's an interesting tool. It's not on a back spring, so it just opens up. I guess it's kind of just a friction fit here. You can see where they've extended the scales and put a pin through it. I'm sure at one time it was a little tighter than it is now. Yeah, it's a little loose now, but I'm sure that could be remedied with just a couple of wraps with a cutler's hammer to pinch that back. But I'm not going to be hitting this knife with anything. In addition to the hook here to pick the hoof, there are files on both sides of the tool and the back, presumably to file the horse hooves. And I guess this would be held like this. Between the fingers there are 2 natural finger grooves here, but it could also have been held like this, as it does fold flat back. Now let's just go through the rest of this knife, because you'll just never see another one of these. So again, the very old style screwdriver without the cap lifter, all carbon steel. The very old style plunge can opener. Listen to the snap on this knife. It's just great. Here we have the pen blade. This one is full. And the main blade, which is also very full, which is really unusual for a knife this old not to have, a blade that's been shortened or chipped or sharpened down over the years. And here's the tank stamp again, Army Swiss, with the Swiss cross to the left. And I found in my notes that that's a tank stamp that dates from 1891 to 1935. So a very rare model, and one in aluminum. It's just really quite incredible. I'd like to show you an image in Victorinox's 100th anniversary book. These are images of their 1903 catalog, and we can find this equestrian model right on the first page given. So I have translated this page. We've got French on this side and German on this side. We'll work with the French because I took a couple years of French in high school and my German is non-existent. So up here at the top, basically it says knives for officers and sport. And then it goes on to say, with the Federal crest. So here they were introducing in 1903 the optional shield that you could have on the knife. And then it goes on to say that the model is deposited, which basically means that they registered it or trademarked it. It's protected by law. And then we'll come down here. We've got a little bit of glare. Let's see if we can do away with that. We'll come down here to where it talks about the model 240, and here you can see it pictured next to it with the hoof pick. And it reads, knife with foot pick or hoof pick, Curepide. And it says, with red fiber, handle, length 9 centimeters, 7 pieces. That would be the number of tools, including the hoof pick. They go on and list them here. Blade, screwdriver, pen knife, can opener, corkscrew, foot pick, and punch. And then they go on and give the price. It says price without the bail, 7.5 Swiss francs each. Price with the bale, 7.85 Swiss francs each. So let's just bring this up a little closer here and take a look at that image. And there you can see that is the exact knife that we've been looking at. Although here in the catalog it's only offered in the red fiber scales, there is no mention of aluminum as an option. So I'm thinking that the aluminum handles were probably either a special order or made in very limited quantities. Okay, I think I will close by taking these rare and special knives and placing them next to their images in the 1903 Elsener's catalog. We'll put this one here up next to the image for the standard, and we'll take the equestrian model with the curepide or hoof pick and put it here in the middle of the page next to its image. So please take a good look at that, folks. You'll only see that here. And of course in Dave Arnold's upcoming book on vintage wingers. Again, these are going to be humorously put in the section of other Swiss makers. Thanks for joining me on this special event. As always, I appreciate your viewership and support. And have fun collecting.